Welcome to our quick video on best practices in Appery development. Today's topic is debugging UI issues, or things you'd like to accomplish in UI that you find challenging. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to go over a real live issue that we found on getsatisfaction.com and use it as a source of the problem we're going to try and solve. We'll go over best practices and where you place your code, calling the debugger in the Chrome side. Using Firefox and other debuggers is similar. Examining UI elements in Appery, using search, and issuing commands in the debugger. And then finally, porting your code back into Appery that you've developed as a result of your work in the debugger. So with that, let's get to it. Let's look at an example issue. So here's a real life problem on getSatisfaction. We're looking to take a radio control group, a checkbox, and change its orientation from being vertical to horizontal based on the screen width. So we're curious as to what set of commands are actually going to get that to work. So with that, I've developed a sample page that should help us get to the bottom of this issue. So here's my sample page. We've got a set of checkboxes that are aligned horizontally. Note that on the checkbox item, which is called My Checkboxes, we've got the vertical as opposed to the horizontal checked. And we're looking for a solution that will allow us to change over to horizontal orientation for the checkboxes. The actual requirement is based on screen width, but I believe the question asker already has a solution to determining screen width. So we'll try and work on a solution for some JavaScript commands that actually get the orientation to change on the fly from the vertical that we specified here over to horizontal. So back over to our agenda really quick. Never a lot of code in an Appery UI element and how to debug essentially that element. These first two topics here, we'll cover that right now. So essentially the requirement is going to be as the page shows itself, let's change the orientation based on certain other data elements from vertical to horizontal. So we'll drop some code in the page show event, and your instinct is going to be to put all of your code inside this page show event. And I'd like you to resist that instinct and just call a JavaScript function from inside of your page show event. That allows you to do debugging of this because all of this code is compiled on the fly and it's hard to find in the Chrome source. So from here, we're just going to call a little function called fdebug. And I've gone through and created a new JavaScript asset using this right here. And then in that JavaScript asset, I've just dropped one simple line of code, which is console logging. And I use a header on all the stuff that helps identify my console logging away from something else that the query might be doing, jQuery might be doing, or the Appery Foundation might be doing. So I've console logged JSInfo, I am Groot. So when we see that come up in the console, that is our key to go try and use the debugger interactively from inside of Chrome. Again, best practice, don't place any of your code for your UI elements actually in the UI. It makes it extremely hard to debug, and you have to rely on a lot of code changes and back and forth with UI in order to get anything done. Best to call it out in a separate JavaScript function. Before we leave, let's note the item that we're interested in is a checkbox group called My Checkboxes. Then we'll run our application and test. So we'll click test, let it rip. And of note, we found our little console logging, JSInfo, I am Groot. Good part about that is not that I've actually learned anything by that, but that allows me to, without too much work, set a breakpoint in my source code. So I can click on, at the far right, I can click on the reference to my source code. I can set a breakpoint in Chrome on that by clicking on the line number next to it. And then I can rerun my app and it will stop there. So we'll do that. Here we go, we're rerunning our app. And note, we've been paused in the debugger. So our goal is to find an attribute on this checkbox that we can actually switch on the fly in our code from vertical to horizontal. So note they're aligned vertically. So best practice here, I like to get my element that's on the UI into a very short variable name and then manipulate it from there. So let's do that. So here I've said A, which is my console variable, is equal to Appery of my checkboxes, which, okay, that's the name that we were supposed to remember from the last. Interesting enough, so what pops up next is an object that tells you that contains all of the UI elements and it's the UI element itself. It's the object UI element, and you can expand it to find methods and other information about that particular object. So I've expanded my object quite a bit here, and I'm not finding anything about the orientation really right off the bat. So I'm going to search actually all of the source code for the word horizontal or vertical and see what I come up with to see if I can find a solution for this problem. So I've typed into my search box the word vertical under the assumption that since the Appery builder has the ability to switch from vertical to horizontal, that it must be a property somewhere. So I've done that. Here's the results of my search, and if I scroll down a little bit, you can see down here in the bottom that we have some interesting code here. Remove class UI control group and remove both these classes and add to the control group a horizontal or a vertical attribute depending on what the options are in the UI that have been set on the builder. So I'm going to grab actually those commands and I'm going to move them back over into the console. So I've clicked on one of the lines here and it appears up above, so that will actually allow me to scrape that code. And I'm going to copy it and bring it back over to the console. So my object is called A, and I'm going to issue some of the commands against my A object, which is really the Appery UI, my checkboxes element. So we're going to try and issue some of those here. So I'm going to paste them back first. Then I'm going to put in front of it my A object. So first I'm going to remove those two attributes from the object by issuing the remove class that I found in the search up above and issue that here. Oh, and I let the debugger move past my breakpoint, so I need to go back and issue those commands again. So here's my retest. I'm back here at my breakpoint again. I can use the up arrow to issue the commands again. A equals Appery my checkboxes. There's my object. Again, expanding it lets me look at it. And then we're going to issue that remove class command. And that was successful because we're still paused here. And we're going to add the class. So it was vertical. We're going to add the class horizontal to it. So again, I'm going back to my pasted source code. That was taken from one of the Appery foundation classes. And I'm going to add class UI control group, and I'm going to add the horizontal element. And remove these words here. And I'm going to press enter. And lo and behold, look, my checkboxes have moved from vertical to horizontal. So just back over to our agenda really quick to check where we're at. We looked at an example issue. We talked about the reasons for not including a lot of code in the Appery UI element and actually placing your code that you use on your page show events or other UI events, moving it into a JavaScript asset. You can easily call the debugger by doing that. We showed you that. We also examined a UI element in Appery. We talked about using search, and we've issued some commands in the debugger to help us debug and find a solution to our issue. Now we're going to take that code, port it back into our Appery JavaScript. So now that we've found a solution, let's just take our code and port it back into our JavaScript. So we really did two things. We did the remove class and we did the add class, right? As well as doing this A equals Appery checkboxes. So let's do all those things. We don't need to do the shortcut on the A because we'll just use the command here. So scrape out Appery my checkboxes back over to our code. So we're going to add that here, back over in our little fdebug function. Again, you can call that whatever you like. We'll add Appery my checkboxes dot, and then we're going to issue our remove class and then our add class, and we'll go grab that code from the debugger. So here's our remove class. We'll copy and paste it. And we'll copy it. We'll paste it back over in our Appery. So here's our JavaScript. We'll paste that back here. Next, we'll do our add class. And here's our add class command. Again, I can find that by using the up and down arrows in the console when you're on your Chrome. We'll paste that in here. And there we have it. We'll leave our console logging there as well as our debug. And so what we should see upon start the application, we'll see it actually switch from what was specified in the UI, in the Appery UI as vertical, switch it over to horizontal. So let's save and test. And there we have it. It has switched itself back over to horizontal. So that ends our best practices in working with the debugger on UA elements. Again, we covered these topics. Here's a list of topics. We covered the example issue, not putting a lot of code in your Appery UI elements, calling the debugger, examining UI elements in Appery, using search, issuing commands in the debugger, and porting that code back into Appery. The advantages of this approach, again, it gives us logging, the ability to debug and do it real time in Chrome, understand the order of execution, and we can quickly find issues by using search, and we can put error logging here as well. So that ends our video for today. Thanks for listening on best practices in Appery development, debugging an issue with your UI. I'm Bruce Stewart. Here's my contact information. Reach out to us with any questions you might have on anything. Thanks very much.